Welcome back to Quietly Secure. Today, I'd like to start with a simple question. When you open your web browser and you visit a website, why do you trust it? Not whether you should trust it, but why do you instinctively believe that you're in the right place? Most of us don't really think about it. We type in an address, click on a search result, tap on a link in an email, perhaps follow something from social media. Within seconds, you're entering passwords, making purchases, reading news, or sharing personal information. Trust happens almost automatically. And that's remarkable, because the internet wasn't built around trust. It was built around communication. The systems that help us decide whether a website is genuine were added gradually over many years, and they work surprisingly well most of the time. Today we're going to explore why websites appear trustworthy, how technologies like HTTPS and certificates actually work, why domain names matter, and perhaps most importantly, why scammers are still successful despite all these protections. Let's begin by winding the clock back. The early internet was a much smaller place. Universities, researchers, government organisations. The people using it generally knew each other, or at least trusted the organisations involved. Security wasn't ignored, but it also wasn't the primary concern. As the internet's expanded into businesses, homes, and eventually everyone's pockets, something changed. Suddenly strangers were exchanging money, ordering products, sharing personal information, logging into banks. The internet needed a way to answer one simple question. Am I really talking to who I think I am? That question sits at the heart of the modern website security. Imagine if websites didn't have names. Instead of quietly-secure.com, you had to remember something like 203.0.113.42. That would be rather inconvenient. Instead, we use domain names. They're essentially addresses that humans can remember. When you type a domain name into your browser, a system called DNS, the domain naming system, translates that friendly name into the numerical address of the server hosting the website. It's often described as the internet's phone book, although today it's rather more sophisticated than that. The important thing is this. You choose to visit a website because of its name, not because of the computer behind it. That's why domain names have become valuable. Businesses spend years building trust in names like their company website, and scammers know this, which is why fake domain names are one of the oldest tricks in the internet. Perhaps a single letter change, an extra word, a different ending, maybe .net instead of .com, or a cleverly disguised spelling that most people wouldn't notice during a busy day. Your browser can only connect to the address you've asked for. If you accidentally type that in wrong, it can't know your intention. Now, let's look at something almost everyone recognises, the little padlock in the browser. Years ago, websites often displayed a warning saying not secure. Today, almost every website uses HTTPS. You may have noticed the letters without ever wondering what they mean. HTTPS is simply the secure version of the web. When you visit an HTTPS website, everything travelling between your device and the website is encrypted. Imagine sending a postcard. Anyone handling it along the way can read what you've written. Now imagine placing that same message inside a locked box that only the recipient can open. That's much closer to what HTTPS provides. If someone intercepts the traffic while it's travelling across the internet, they can see the communication exists, but they can't easily read its contents. That's incredibly important when you're logging into websites, shopping online, or accessing your bank. Without HTTPS, passwords could potentially be exposed while travelling across networks. Today, thankfully, that's become increasingly rare. Here's where things become interesting. Encryption protects your conversation, but it doesn't automatically prove who you're talking to. Imagine receiving a locked letter, it's securely sealed, nobody else can read it, but how do you know who actually sent it? That's where digital certificates enter the picture. Every secure website presents a digital certificate. Think of it as an electronic form of identification, not unlike a passport or a driving license. The certificate says, I am this website. But here's the important part. The website doesn't issue its own certificate. That would be rather like printing your own passport at home. Instead, trusted organisations called certificate authorities verify ownership before issuing certificates. Your browser already knows which certificate authorities it trusts. When you visit a website, your browser checks that certificate. Is it valid? Has it expired? Does it belong to this domain? Has anyone reported it as compromised? If everything checks out, the secure connection continues silently. All of this happens in a fraction of a second. Most people never notice, which is exactly how good security should feel. Quiet, reliable, almost invisible. So, if certificates exist and browsers check them, why do scam websites still work? Because certificates prove ownership of a domain, not honesty. That's an important distinction. A criminal can register a domain name, request a perfectly valid certificate, enable HTTPS, and now they've got a secure connection. They're securely pretending to be someone else. That encryption is real, the certificate is genuine, the website is still fraudulent. This surprises many people. For years we've been told, look for the padlock. The padlock isn't wrong. It simply answers a different question. It says, the connection is secure. It does not say, this organisation is trustworthy. When we decide whether we trust a person, we rarely rely on a single piece of evidence. We consider lots of small signals. Do we recognise them? Have we met before? Does their story make sense? Does anything feel unusual? Trusting websites work in much the same way. Technology provides some of those signals, certificates, encryption, secure connections, but humans still need to evaluate everything else. Is this the correct website? Did I arrive here unexpectedly? Does this page ask for information that seems unusual? Does something simply feel out of place? Technology can reduce risk, it can't replace judgment. Many people assume scams succeed because people aren't careful. I don't think that's entirely fair. Scammers have become exceptionally good at understanding human behaviour. They don't attack computers first, they attack attention. They create urgency. Your account's been suspended. Your parcel couldn't be delivered. You've won a prize. Verify your details immediately. When people feel rushed, they stop checking. The fake website only needs to look convincing for a few moments, long enough for someone to type a password, or a payment card, or a one-time verification code. That's why security awareness isn't really about becoming suspicious of everything. It's about recognizing when someone is trying to rush your decision making. One of the simplest security habits I've ever learned doesn't involve software, or settings, or expensive technology. It's simply to pause. If a website asks for something important, take 5 seconds. Look at the address. Think about how you arrived there. Ask yourself, did I choose to come here? Or was I pushed here? Those few seconds are surprisingly powerful because scammers rely on momentum. A brief pause often breaks that. Browsers continue to improve. Websites become more secure. Fraud detection becomes more sophisticated. Artificial intelligence is beginning to help identify phishing websites more quickly. At the same time, artificial intelligence is also helping criminals create more convincing scams. Just as we discussed last season, technology rarely moves in only one direction. Every improvement creates new opportunities for defenders and for the attackers. The challenge isn't to build a perfectly trustworthy internet. It probably isn't possible. The challenge is to build systems that make trust easier to establish, whilst helping us recognise when something doesn't seem quite right. The internet works because, most of the time, trust is earned, not through a single technology, but through layers. Domain names help us find the right place. Certificates verify ownership. HTTPS protects our conversations. And browsers perform thousands of checks every day without us even noticing. It's an extraordinary achievement, yet none of those systems can completely replace human judgment. The safest internet users aren't necessarily the most technical. They're often the people who remain calm and curious, who notice small inconsistencies, who aren't afraid to pause before clicking, who understand that trust is something we build, not something technology can simply guarantee. Thank you for listening to Quietly Secure. Next time we'll look beyond websites themselves and explore something even more fascinating: the psychology of scams. Because before criminals ever target our device, they usually target our minds. Until then, stay curious, stay calm, and as always, stay quietly secure.